During my 3 tours to Afghanistan, the MEO, the departure preparation became pretty matter of fact towards the end, but initially it was rather tough, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what to take even. A loadmaster's role in a C-130 is primarily to look after the weight and balance of the aeroplane. So when we load stuff on, it's like a big seesaw. And you're required to ensure that the seesaw stays in balance at all times, and particularly through flight when you burn fuel, the centre of balance will move around. So you have to make sure that the calculations will allow you to take off safely, fly safely, and then land safely. The next job is to look after the passengers and the crew. And that entails everything from making sure that people get their emergency brief, just like you do on a civilian airline, when the Qantas people, cabin crew, talk to you about making sure your seatbelt's done up, when you can move around, the meal that you'll be receiving on the flight. And we were also involved with air dispatch, particularly into Tarin Kowt when it was snowed in, or if the runway, when it was before it was sealed, when it was muddy through the torrential rain they used to get up there, and we couldn't land to drop off supplies, we would go up and airdrop out of the back of the Hercules equipment and supplies. Generally, most flights that we embarked upon, both into Iraq and Afghanistan, we took ground fire, generally small arms, and we were always above small arms threat height. So at around about the 10 to 15,000 foot mark was generally the time that you would be engaged. And it was always someone in a white ute. There must be plenty of them over there, but it was always a white ute pulled up on the side of the road, and you would see muzzle flashes from, I'm guessing, AK-47s up to light to medium calibre weapons. But we were generally at height and took no rounds while I was there. I certainly remember the first time I flew into Tarin Kowt. I was quite amazed by the beauty of the country that surrounded Tarin Kowt. There were high mountains just a few kilometres away, and certainly on the approach in, it was a very steep approach to the airfield, which was located in a bowl area near the town of Tarin Kowt. And so it was a very quick descent from height. I was on the right-hand side, and the role of the loadmaster is to watch out the windows for threats, for ground threats, and call them. And I was looking out of the right-hand window, trying to keep up with the aeroplane, and saw that the aircraft wing, as we banked into and onto short finals, came extremely, from my impression anyway, very close to the ground, probably some 150 to 200 feet, but for me it was quite an exciting ride the first time into Tarin Kowt. Another time on approach into Kandahar airfield late at night, we had 2 or 3 passengers on board. We'd been very busy all day doing short hops from Kandahar into Tarin Kowt, delivering coalition forces and equipment. So it was the end of the day, about 6, 7 o'clock at night. Sun was going down. As I mentioned before, beautiful scenery around Afghanistan with the sun setting on the hill. Almost in quite another world of my own when I heard the right-hand loadmaster, as he was looking out the door, call missile, 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 and a large thud shook the aircraft. What the thud was, I thought it was a missile. However, it was the aircraft self-protection going off, and that was quite a scary experience. So the investigation by ground forces found that it was a rocket that was probably being prepared for deployment onto the base at Kandahar, but that the insurgents thought, well, a big fat loafing Herc flying by, I might have a go at that, and we were the unlucky recipients. Luckily we survived and landed quite shaken, but happy to get back to a warm bed that night. The maintainers that looked after our aeroplanes, looked after the engines, airframes, the electronics on board, were always up against a pretty tough ask. We'd go away for the day, we'd spend 12 hours away from the base and end up breaking their aeroplane and bringing it back partly broken. So overnight they'd be up against it, trying to get the aircraft fixed. I think when we would go out and do the medical evacuations, particularly into Tarin Kowt for the Special Forces guys, on a number of occasions, going in there and seeing broken bodies carried onto the aeroplane, it was always disturbing when you could see the ambulance coming towards the aeroplane. A lot of times we didn't know what to expect, and that's the life of a loadmaster. It does bring a tear to your eye to know that we are at war and these people are out there doing it pretty tough and unfortunately are injured in the line of duty. The mood and the scenario in the back of an aeroplane, particularly in a C-130, when you're travelling into Afghanistan for about 9 hours, you develop a great camaraderie with the passengers, and after all, it's a lot of hours of just mind-numbing droning through the air. They were clean cut. Everything shined, everything was in good working order. You almost sometimes you could say that they'd ironed their camouflage clothing, so they smelt nice as well. They always smelt quite nice going in, but we dropped them off and of course not see them for 6 months. But the guys coming out, that was a different kettle of fish. They were glad to see us. They didn't smell that good when they got on board, but by the end of the flight, they were glad to get off and glad to be overnighting on their way home eventually back to Australia. One of the lasting impressions that has stayed with me from my trips into Afghanistan, in particular into Tarin Kowt, is the excitement that people would run up the ramp at times with. It was generally the end of their deployment. And on many occasions I was hugged and kissed by a big hairy Special Forces trooper because I was taking him home. Coming home to Australia, it was a very special experience on each occasion. I must say it was always good also to look out the window of the aircraft bringing us back into Australia and not have to worry about people shooting at us, and deploying aircraft self-preservation means to land safely in an area. Though I still do, when I travel on Qantas flights around Australia with work, I still take a keen look outside just to make sure that there aren't any white utes lining up and rolling back the tarpaulin to have a shot at us.